You've got a cool $15 coming, Pops. That's what my kid announced, overflowing with the kind of arrogance you'd expect from someone about to inherit a cool $160 million from his mom. He insisted I be there for the big will reveal, craving my reaction when the world was supposed to learn how worthless I apparently was. What he didn't realize was that his mom had a final ace up her sleeve, and somehow I was a key player in her plan. The hum of my planer was my kind of jam. For half a decade, it played the soundtrack of my life. Every high-pitched screech was like a note in a melody, each curling walnut shaving, a line of poetry. In my cozy Austin, Texas workspace, there were no failed architect labels, no discarded husband vibes. Here, I was just a craftsman, turning what others saw as scraps into something solid and real. My hands, roughened and worn from years of labor, knew the truth of the wood. It never put on airs or played tricks. It was simply there, with its beautiful knots and flaws. I found solace in that. The scent of sawdust and linseed oil was my comfort. I was shaping a rocking chair, tracing its smooth armrest, carving it with care. Life was uncomplicated, serene. And then, out of nowhere, it flipped upside down. My old flip phone buzzed atop a cluttered workbench, cutting through the air like a wake-up call. I flipped off the planer, and the silence filled the room like a heavy drumbeat. Dusting off my jeans, I peered at the phone. 2 words glared back at me, cold and stiff. Nathan Thorne. 20 years. That's how long had slipped by. 2 decades without a friendly chat. Just orders or jabs. No festive greetings, no birthday notes, just this vast silence built from layers of blame and resentment. I assumed it'd stay that way until one of us bit the dust. Well, I was sort of right. I breathed deep, tasting the sawdust, and flipped the phone open. My voice felt unused, rusty. Hello? On the other end, a sharp voice from a world far removed from my own, filled with NYC's hustle and endless powwows. Julian. He hadn't called me Dad in forever. Now I was merely Julian. He said my name like it was a bit of lint bothering him. Nathan, your mom's gone. His words were emotionless, entirely flat, as if he were announcing the 7 o'clock news. Last week, a stroke. Fast. I stood there, staring out of my shop into the sunny Texas yard, a numbness wrapping around me. Isabella gone. The words felt off, wrong. She had been this force of nature, ambitious, creative, gorgeous, and completely overwhelming. Thinking of her as just gone seemed unfitting. Growing frustrated with my silence, he pushed on. Did you understand me? The funeral? I started to ask, my mouth dry. But he interrupted. It's over. Your name didn't even make the invite. But here's the deal. Why I called. Her lawyer says you have to be at the will reading. This Friday, 10 a.m. sharp, Caldwell and Finch's office in Manhattan. Don't be late. It was less an invite and more a command, from a son who long ago deemed himself king of a kingdom I'd been booted from. I finally found my voice, trying to keep it calm. I've no reason to go. Nathan, Isabella, and I settled everything 20 years ago in the courtroom. Neither has anything of the others. Laughter crackled through the phone, sudden and void of mirth. It was pure contempt, and that, more than any slur, stirred something deep inside me. Oh, come on, he jeered. You're not getting a dime. Don't fool yourself. Mom couldn't stand you, but it's just procedure, some boring legal stuff. You gotta show up in person to hear you're nothing. A signed and stamped confirmation of your non-existent role in this family. He paused, letting his words sink in. Personally, I just want to see the look on your face when you hear this. I'm curious to watch that fake sense of dignity you cling to just crumble. Honestly, that's all you're still good for these days. Witnessing the gut punch of humiliation was something. It was almost impressive. This wasn't just a son's anger. It was more like the cold ruthlessness of a conqueror, eager to see his enemy squirm. "So, are you finished?" I asked, my voice quiet, but with an edge of something dangerous. "Almost," he shot back, amusement dripping from his words like poison mixed with sugar. "Don't worry about the return trip. I'll send you off with $15 for the bus, a little going-away present." And with that, the line went dead. The click echoed as I held the phone to my ear, letting the dial tone hum in my head for a second. The workshop was silent, but now it felt different, oppressive, almost suffocating, with anger I'd hidden under layers of sawdust and acceptance. It wasn't a blazing fury, more like embers burning slowly under the surface. He hadn't called to include me in the will out of goodwill. He wanted to watch me fall apart in public. If it was a spectacle he wanted, a spectacle he'd get. I set down the phone gently, feeling the smooth curve of the half-finished rocking chair beneath my palm. Then, I left the workshop and headed into the small house attached to it. I rifled through my closet, past the flannel shirts and worn jeans I usually wore. There, under a dusty cover, lay a garment bag I hadn't touched in 20 years. Inside was my one suit, a charcoal gray one, the same one I'd worn the day my old life crumbled. Now it would herald the start of his. By Friday morning, the cab ride from LaGuardia felt like entering another dimension. Austin's sunny, calm streets melted away, replaced by the towering giants of steel and glass in Manhattan. Paying the fare stung more than I'd expected, and I stepped out onto the cold, sharp sidewalk. There, the Caldwell and Finch building didn't just stand. It loomed like a dark cliff of polished glass and stone. I pushed through the revolving doors, leaving the city's chatter behind for a hush. The lobby was like a shrine to wealth. Vast stretches of white marble floors polished to mirror the ceiling lights above. The walls, covered in rich mahogany, carried the drifting scent of lemon oil and old money. Despite years spent designing buildings, I'd never created anything like this. It wasn't a place for people. It was built to intimidate, make anyone stepping inside feel minuscule. And I did. Standing there in my one good suit, the charcoal gray, made of fine wool, an artifact you don't find easily these days. However, with its oversized cut and heavy shoulder pads, it was 20 years out of fashion. But it was clean. I'd pressed the suit myself back in Austin, making sure the pants had creases sharp enough to cut. It was old, the suit I wore for the divorce hearing. The last time I saw Isabella, only this time her face flashed with icy disappointment, fueled by our son's betrayal. The faint smell of mothballs lingered around me, something between keeping things pristine and rotting away. As I approached the reception, my worn leather soles made echoes across the marble, the sound almost embarrassingly loud in the library-like quiet. Nearby, a group of young lawyers dressed in suits pricier than my truck barely glanced up from their screens. Their eyes flicked to me, then went back, categorizing and dismissing in a heartbeat. To them, I was neither a client nor a threat. Just some old man, a curiosity that didn't belong. I felt out of place, like a flawed spot on a perfect canvas, like ink blotting onto a pristine legal document. Feeling out of place, that was Nathan's intention from the start, bringing me into his world, this fortress of authority, dressed in the uniform of my biggest loss. As I neared the reception desk, an imposing slice of marble that seemed to, the place felt like it was sculpted right out of rock. There was this young blonde woman at the desk. Her headset blended so well it was like part of her. She asked if she could help, her tone all bubbly, but her eyes said she'd rather be somewhere else. I mentioned I was there for a 10 o'clock meeting, my voice gruff as sandpaper. I added it was about Isabella Thorne's will reading, and that I was Julian Thorne. When she caught the name Thorne, something lit up in her eyes. She knew the name, though not the face. She was probably expecting someone like Nathan, someone who seemed to belong there. Her expression momentarily showed confusion and a hint of scorn before she put on her professional mask again. With a smile that didn't reach her eyes, she told me Mr. Harrison was expecting me and directed me to the seating area. She motioned to a waiting space with low black leather couches around a big glass table. I sat on the edge of one. The leather felt stiff and cold. My hands, rough from years of carpentry, rested on my worn suit. I looked at the abstract paintings on the walls, just colors and forms filling a space, no real meaning. It felt like I was a forgotten ghost from the past, and there I was, waiting to hear the official confirmation that I was worth nothing, just like my son had predicted. The anger from our phone call started bubbling up inside me. I wasn't there to be humiliated. I was there to see things through. Nathan didn't just walk into the waiting room. He made sure people noticed, and he wasn't alone. He moved with the swagger of someone who never heard no. His navy Tom Ford suit likely cost more than I could make in half a year. It fitted him perfectly, showing off a body maintained by personal trainers, not hard labor. His hair was slicked back, and his wrist flashed bright gold and steel. He wore the kind of sneer that came with being bored and entitled. Trailing Nathan was his entourage. First came a young woman, impossibly thin and stunning in a way that seemed unnatural. She wore a tight designer dress, clinging to her purse like it was her lifeline. I learned later she was Sophia, absorbed in her phone, thumb darting across the screen. The second was a man in his 40s with a too dark tan for October in New York, and teeth so white they seemed fake. He had a carnivorous grin. This was Kyle, the so-called financial advisor. They weren't there to mourn a loss. They were circling what they considered theirs. Nathan walked up to the reception desk, not even glancing my way. "Nathan Thorne," he announced, his voice bouncing slightly off the walls. "Mr. Harrison is expecting me." The receptionist, who barely acknowledged me before, turned on the charm. "Yes, Mr. Thorne. Right away, please have a seat." He turned to claim a leather sofa, and that's when his gaze settled on me. He stopped, letting a slow, mocking grin stretch across his face, the look of a cat that spotted a mouse. He approached, his pricey shoes silent on the marble floor, with his entourage now interested. "My God," he said loud enough for all to hear. "You actually showed up?" He surveyed me, from my old suit to the worn collar of my shirt. "I guess you really are hard up for that 15 Sophia," he added with a smirk. The young woman looked up from her phone for the first time, offering a high-pitched laugh that was like glass breaking. Kyle's predatory grin widened as he looked me over, not seeing a man, but an outdated piece of furniture meant to be tossed out. No handshake, just a cold once-over. Nathan gestured at me, introducing me to his crew. "This," he said, letting the word hang, "is my father." The word father came out like it was something filthy he had to own up to. Nathan was practically apologizing for my presence, my shabby clothes, and for the fact that I didn't live up to whatever grand image he had in mind. I remembered Nathan when he was just a 10-year-old kid. It was Christmas morning, and for weeks I'd been tucked away in my old workshop, back when I still had one, meticulously building an intricate model of a battleship. When I finally completed it, I felt such a swell of pride. Nathan opened the box, glanced at the model briefly, and just tossed it aside like it meant nothing. "This isn't some branded thing," he grumbled. "I want what my friends have." Isabella, always quick to throw money at problems, swooped in with an expensive video game console. She was molding this spoiled kid, pampering him one moment at a time. As I stood there, looking at my son, He seemed more like a collection of desires wrapped in a $10,000 suit than the kid I once knew. I didn't say a word, didn't even flinch. I locked eyes with him, holding his arrogant stare and keeping composed. This silence seemed to throw him off balance more than if I'd exploded. He was waiting for a reaction, anger, begging, anything to solidify his control over me. I gave him nothing, just stood there, a quiet figure in a gray suit, witnessing the spectacle he wanted to create. His smile faded. He wasn't getting any joy out of this now. He turned away to chat with Kyle about selling off real estate when suddenly the heavy oak door swung open. A man stood framed in the entrance, and the atmosphere instantly changed, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. The moment was about to unfold. There was my son, lost in his own ego, and my mind drifted back to that Christmas morning when he was just 10. The house was filled with the scent of fresh pine and cinnamon goodies baking. For weeks, I'd labored in my workshop on that battleship model for him, the USS Missouri, complete with tiny cannons, coiled ropes, and a carefully painted flag aft. I was so proud of it, convinced he'd be thrilled. He opened the box, looked at it for a moment, and tossed it aside. "This isn't a brand," he declared, his voice loud and clear for all to hear. "I want what my friends have." My wife, Isabella, didn't try to correct him or explain the value of a heartfelt gift. Instead, she appeared with a dazzlingly wrapped box containing the priciest, newest video game console. It wasn't about kindness. It was about ease. Piece by piece, she was building this monster, trading his love for convenience. I think she knew then what she was creating. This memory lingered, tangible, bitter, and sorrowful. Just then, the memory was cut short by the door swinging open. Framed in the doorway was a man in his 60s, standing tall in an impeccable gray suit that had authority without flaunting wealth. This was Mr. Harrison. His face was like that of a judge, impassive, serious, with eyes that didn't just look at you, but weighed you, assessed you, and filed you away. His quiet confidence silenced the room instantly. Even Nathan seemed to shrink under Mr. Harrison's gaze, which skimmed over Nathan and his group like they were just part of the scenery, before stopping on me. Our eyes met for a moment, and I noticed something flash across his face. It wasn't pity, but something closer to understanding. He walked towards me. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice calm and respectful. "Thank you for being here." He didn't extend his hand, but his words were like a handshake, a simple acknowledgement of my presence, my right to be there. Only then did he turn to my son. "Mr. Thorne," he repeated, but this time with a colder, distant tone. The slight was subtle enough that it could have gone unnoticed by many. But for Nathan, whose world was built on fragile layers of status and favoritism, this recognition of me first was a direct challenge to his authority. I saw a flicker of annoyance in his eyes, a tightening of his jaw, though he tried to hide it behind a smirk of dismissive arrogance. "Let's get this done, Harrison," he snapped, impatience lacing his words. "I have a reservation at P-Ray for a celebration. I won't be late." Mr. Harrison's demeanor remained unchanged, giving a nod. "As you wish," he said, holding the door to the conference room open. "This way, gentlemen." The conference room had the same cold and daunting vibe as the lobby, but it also felt like something big was about to happen. In the center, there was a massive table made out of dark, glossy mahogany, shining like a still pond. On one side of the room, floor-to-ceiling windows showed nothing but a harsh view of the gray skyscraper next door, not the sky. This was a place designed for sealing huge deals and crushing opponents. Nathan naturally chose the chair furthest from the door, asserting himself as the new head of the family. He leaned back, arms stretched out wide, claiming his territory. Sophia and Kyle sat on either side of him, like chess pieces protecting their king. I took a seat near the door, almost invisible, just a legal formality in the room. My calloused hands stood out against the perfect surface of the table. Mr. Harrison walked confidently to the head of the table, but didn't sit right away. Instead, he placed a hefty, leather-bound book down with a soft thud that did nothing to ease the tense atmosphere. Taking his time, he pulled out a chair, settled in, then reached into his pocket for a pair of simple gold-rimmed glasses. He put them on with a deliberate calm, very much in control. As he opened the binder, the creamy pages came into view, and he cleared his throat. "This," he declared, his voice firm and clear, "is the last will and testament of Isabella Montoya Thorne, dated August 4th of this year. I, Isabella Montoya Thorne." Even after she was gone, she left a mark. She had taken my last name when we married, but she built her legacy on her own. Montoya. That name held a mighty weight, worth $160 million, as my son proudly noted. Harrison's tone was perfectly drab, just right for reading from legal papers. "Being of sound mind and body, I do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all former wills and codicils previously made by me." Nathan sighed, glancing at his pricey watch, clearly getting bored already. "First," Harrison went on, "I direct that all my just debts and funeral expenses be paid from my estate." He paused, then turned the page. "Second, I give and bequeath the sum of $50,000 tax-free to my housekeeper, Maria Gonzalez, in gratitude for her 25 years of loyal service and her unending patience." Nathan rolled his eyes, murmuring something to Kyle too faint for me to catch, but I did pick up the word peanuts. Against my will, a small smile almost tugged at my lips. Maria. I remembered her fondly. She'd been with Isabella long before the real money started flowing in. A gentle, kind person who always had a hot cup of coffee ready for me in the kitchen after my fiery arguments with Isabella. She had seen it all. She truly earned every penny. It was a throwback to the Isabella I once knew. Generous, but on her terms. Third, Harrison read on, his voice steady as ever, I give and bequeath the sum of $100,000 to the Monarch Butterfly Preservation Fund. Sophia had a reaction this time, letting out a soft, incredulous laugh. But butterflies? She whispered to Nathan, loud enough for me to hear. Is she really serious? An unexpected tightness gripped my chest. It wasn't quite sorrow. It was something more layered. Nostalgia. Before Nathan was born, before Montoya Designs became huge, Isabella and I once took an old Jeep down to Mexico. We stayed in cheap motels and hiked miles just to witness the monarch sanctuaries. I could still picture her in the clearing, surrounded by a fluttering sea of orange and black wings, gazing up at the sky with tears on her cheeks. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, Julian, she had whispered. It's like the world's souls all flying home. She remembered. Despite the bitterness, the legal battles, and years of silence, she held on to that memory. This donation wasn't simply money, it was a message. Fourth, I give and bequeath the sum of $25,000 to my driver, Miguel Rodriguez, for his excellent service and for never once commenting on the colorful guests my son brought to my home. Nathan jolted upright, shocked. What in the world is that supposed to mean? He raged, while Kyle gently placed a calming hand on his shoulder. Nathan, it's just a little joke, nothing more, she reassured him. But Nathan wasn't amused at all. He was clearly upset. Nathan was having one of those days where nothing seemed to be going his way. He pictured himself as the main act, but was getting upstaged by the warm-up, and that didn't sit right with him. He drummed his fingers on the polished mahogany table, creating a rhythm of impatience. Meanwhile, Harrison, without a care in the world, carried on reading. And fifth, I donate my collection of first edition modernist poetry to the New York Public Library. Nathan kept drumming away. Except, Harrison continued, for one book, a 1922 edition of T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land, which goes to... Nathan's patience snapped, and he smacked the table like he was setting off fireworks. Harrison, come on, man, he shouted. Can we just skip all this charity talk and the butler tips? I've got places to be, like a dinner reservation. Let's jump to the good stuff. Properties, investments, cash. Just hand it all over to me already. The room froze in awkward silence as Harrison stopped speaking. He wasn't fazed or upset. He just took a moment. Slowly, he raised his gaze, pulled off his reading glasses with the precision of a surgeon, folded them, and fixed Nathan with a stare that could cut through steel. His look screamed one word: unimpressed. Harrison had dealt with his fair share of entitled fools, and today he'd hit his limit. Mr. Thorne, Harrison snapped, discarding his earlier monotone. This isn't a negotiation or a business deal. It's your late mother's will. I'm going to read every word she penned, and you'll listen. Got it? Nathan turned a shade of furious red. He was being put in his place, and he didn't like it one bit. He was left speechless, with Kyle shaking his head in the background, noting Nathan's predicament. Once satisfied, Harrison took his time sipping water and resumed in his regular bland tone, control firmly back in his hands. Now, where were we? Oh yes, Harrison continued, leaving the first edition of The Waste Land to... He paused, a hint of a smile ghosting his lips. Actually, that part's been changed. Moving on. Sixth, concerning my son's circle. Harrison's eyes brushed over Nathan, asserting his control before returning to the will. His voice evened out. Now, moving on to Article 6 regarding Nathan Thorne's connections. Kyle, who was Nathan's financial advisor, perked up, grinning like a cat about to fish in a bowl, ready for his cut. Sophia finally set her phone down, eyes glittering with anticipation. Harrison continued, to Mr. Kyle Vance, financial advisor. Harrison stressed the title as if it needed inverted commas. I bequeath $5,000. The room emitted a collective gasp. The amount was an insult, hardly enough for a decent suit. Kyle's grip on the table tightened, his knuckles blanching. Nathan glared at him, irate, as if Kyle's reaction was his mess. But Harrison was only getting started. I strongly recommend, with legal authority, that he use this for a refresher ethics course. I have records indicating he greatly needs it. Kyle's grin vanished, replaced by a look of fury and disbelief. He turned to Nathan, his voice a harsh whisper. What the hell is happening? It was clear he felt humiliated, called out as a cheat in front of everyone. But Harrison kept going, shifting focus to the young woman at Nathan's side. To my son's current girlfriend, Sophia, I leave the fake designer purse she tried to pass as a real Birkin recently. If Kyle was stunned, then Sophia was set ablaze. Her expertly layered makeup couldn't mask the red rage. Her jaw hung open, taken completely off guard. She'd been outed as a charlatan right in front of her intended catch. In front of the lawyer, and in front of me, leaving her in the lurch without so much as a farewell. She's out of her mind, Sophia shouted, her usual elegance shattered, her voice breaking with each word. She's spreading lies I never— Enough! Nathan bellowed, his voice bouncing off the lavish wooden walls. He wasn't defending her. He was shutting things down to control the situation. His polished reputation was falling apart, all because of a dead woman's final message. His anger wasn't from care. It was because this mess was tarnishing his moment of triumph. Who's bothered about a bag? Who even cares about $5,000? He barked at them, then turned his glare to the lawyer. Just move on, Harrison. Stop wasting time and get to my part already. I sat there unmovingly, feeling a rare connection to Isabella for the first time in 20 years. It was the woman I had married, not the victim my son described. She had morphed into this sharp, calculating person, doing more than just reading a will. She was squaring off every last score, tearing through Nathan's world until only greed was left standing. She knew what she was doing, cutting through the clutter before the grand finale. Mr. Harrison remained calm amidst the chaos, waiting patiently. His face blank, he finally spoke up. "As I stated before, Mr. Thorne, I must read everything word for word. So, may I proceed?" I observed as Isabella's words worked their magic on everyone. Kyle looked as if he'd gulped down something vile, while Sophia sat there fuming with humiliation. That was the Isabella I recalled. Not forgetting a single slight, she returned every insult with interest. Even from the grave, via this leather-bound script, she was still settling her accounts with precision. After a brief pause, Harrison flipped to the next page. Everyone in the room sensed this was the big moment. "Article 7, he announced, resorting to his formal, lawyerly voice. "To my son, Nathan Thorne," he started. Nathan leaned in, holding his breath, hands gripping the table if he was drowning. He tuned out everyone else, zeroing in on the attorney. "I bequeath the penthouse apartment on Park Avenue." Nathan finally exhaled deeply, relief washing over him. He sent a smug look Kyle's way and flashed a victorious smile at me. The fancy apartment, his prize, was secured. "And my entire collection of PC Felipe watches," Harrison continued. Nathan's smugness turned into an ear-to-ear grin, a laugh escaping him. "Yes, we've got something," he said, locking eyes with me, his excitement evident. "You hear, old man? The Pex watches, every single one." But Harrison lifted a finger, stopping Nathan mid-celebration. "However," he said, letting the word sink in, "the watch collection is locked in a safe inside the penthouse. The sole key to that safe." Harrison paused, locking eyes with me across the shiny mahogany table. "I've entrusted to his father, Julian Thorne." A heavy silence set in. All you could hear was the soft hum of the air conditioner. Sophia and Kyle, still reeling from earlier, fixated on me. Nathan just gazed, his earlier victorious flush turning ghostly pale, his grin wiped away. "What?" he stammered, trying to make sense of it. "What did you just say?" he snapped, his voice rising. "The key, Mr. Thorne's care." Nathan slammed his fists on the table, his chair scraping loudly as it slid back. "What on earth are you saying? Is this some twisted joke?" He jabbed a shaking finger at me. "Him? He hasn't been in her life for 20 years. He doesn't even know where she lived. He's a nobody." All eyes turned to me, mirroring Nathan's disbelief. I focused on Harrison, my thoughts swirling. A key. Isabella had handed me a key. What could it mean? Was it another one of her tricks, a way to haunt me? I had no clue about this key, completely blind to it, while I sat there, the unassuming figure in the gray suit, feeling everyone's eyes on me, trying to piece it all together. My boy Nathan was screaming, his expression awash with shock and fury. Yet, my thoughts were far from that cold, wood-paneled room where we stood. As Mr. Harrison rustled his papers, the smooth sound of them sliding together carried me back through 2 decades of bottled-up feelings to another moment of turmoil. Suddenly I wasn't in New York. I was back in our old Connecticut home. It was 2005, the middle of the night, 3 a.m., and everything was pitch dark, except for the glow from Isabella's office. I found her there. She wasn't shedding tears. Somehow that was worse. She just stared hollowly at spreadsheets, her face chalky and devoid of life. It was as if something inside her had snapped. Her company, Montoya Designs, meant everything to her. It defined who she was, but it was falling apart. A grand resort project in the Caribbean had stretched her thin. She'd trusted the wrong people, and the venture was built on shaky permits and fragile hopes. Now, everything was crashing. The banks were calling in their loans. Investors were threatening lawsuits that could obliterate her. As she sat there, overwhelmed by the threat of not just bankruptcy but complete ruin, I remember sitting beside her, the glow of her screen casting strange shadows across her face. "It's over, Julian," she murmured, her tone empty and broken. "Everything I've worked for, it's finished. They're going to take our home. They're going to take everything." She wasn't just afraid of losing wealth. We'd been poor before. We knew what that was like. What terrified her was the thought of failing, of being perceived as a fool. Her entire identity rested on her reputation as a formidable businesswoman. And now, facing a public downfall, her eyes, normally brimming with determination, looked vacant. "They're accusing me of criminal negligence," she nearly whispered. "They're saying I deceived them." I looked at the woman who was my wife, the mother of my child, the fierce, passionate person I loved. That's when I realized she was going under, and she might drag us all with her. The memory from 2005 hit me hard, piercing through my mind. Isabella, in her office, beyond repair. It wasn't just an appearance. She was truly shattered. For a week, our home felt mortuary-like. The phone rang non-stop, angry bankers and betrayed investors calling. But Isabella let the calls go unanswered. She quit eating, couldn't sleep. She'd stay in her office, fixated on her company's draining finances. She was caught in a loop, sinking. And then, about a week into this nightmare, a lifeline appeared. It didn't come from a bank, a friend, or a trusted colleague, but from an encrypted email routed through the UAE. It was an invitation to meet a private equity group out of Dubai that I'd never heard of. They claimed they'd been keeping an eye on Monontoya Designs for a while and saw promise. Isabella was too far gone to attend the meeting herself, too paranoid even to have conversations over the phone. By then, she was a ghost of herself. She begged me to go on her behalf. Even though I wasn't part of the business anymore, I was her life partner. As an architect, I knew the construction side of her business inside out. So, I went. The meeting took place in a dull conference room at a hotel near JFK Airport. There were 3 of them, not bankers, but young men dressed sharply in matching dark suits, eyes as cold and unreadable as a frozen lake. These guys had been around the block plenty of times. Their overly formal manner was intense, the kind that feels scarier than a direct insult. They laid their offer on the table. It seemed like a miracle, too good to be true. They proposed to infuse $100 million into Monontoya Designs right away, enough to breathe life back into the Caribbean project, enough to satisfy the pickiest of bankers, enough to crush the lawsuits that loomed with criminal accusations. It was a complete lifeline. I just sat there, utterly stunned. So there I was, eyeing the guy across the table with just a hint of suspicion. "What's the catch?" I asked, trying to keep it casual. The main guy, this smooth-talking dude with a touch of a British accent, pushed a sleek leather folder in my direction. "We're just investors, Mr. Thorne. All we want is to back upcoming projects. We believe in the Monontoya brand and want to help it expand." I took that folder home, and man, did it feel heavy, like carrying a load of bricks. Isabella, ever on the lookout for a glimmer of hope, dove right into it. For 10 solid minutes, she was over the moon, laughing through her tears, hugging the papers like they were our saviors. "Julian, this is it. We're saved." But I wasn't so sure. I'm used to combing through contracts, analyzing blueprints. Things like that are my bread and butter. And this deal? Well, it wasn't a lifeline. It was a blueprint for something shady. "Isabella," I said, gently interrupting her joy. Check this out. The expenses they've listed. I showed her the sections they hoped to sneak past us. These were the projects they wanted to bankroll, luxury skyscrapers, but the forecasts were all wrong. See these figures? I said. They're inflated by at least 40%. At first, she didn't catch on, her gaze fixated on the promised $100 million. So what? She shrugged. They're overpaying, not our problem. No, I countered, feeling a chill down my spine. That's the catch. It's not an investment, Isabella. It's a money laundering scheme. Her smile disappeared. What are you talking about? I explained that they'd hand us a $100 million lifeline now, saving the company temporarily. But instead of covering actual costs, we'd bill them $140 million. Then, they'd use various shell companies and offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands to clean that extra $40 million, making it appear as legitimate construction payments. I pointed to the contract's signature page. They're not investing, Isabella. They're laundering, using our company as a front. Her face turned ghostly white as it dawned on her. She had poured her heart into making Monontoya synonymous with luxury, class, and integrity. Now these guys wanted to turn it into a tool for their dirty money operations. No, she murmured. I won't do it. Then we face bankruptcy, I said bluntly. It's finished. No, she shouted, the word exploding out of her. She sprang up, pacing the room, her fingers tearing at her hair in desperation. You don't get it, Julian, she pleaded, her nails digging into my shirt. If we collapse, they'll dig up everything. There'll be a forensic audit. They'll uncover the Caribbean deal. They'll accuse me of neglect, maybe fraud. Her eyes were wild with fear. This is better than that, Isabella, I implored. This scheme is criminal. It's like dealing with the mob or something worse. I don't care, she shouted back, then just crumbled into a heap on the expensive Persian rug, all her strength gone. No longer the commanding CEO, just a scared woman at her wit's end. Julian, she sobbed into the floor. I can't go to jail. Please help me. She glanced up at me, her face a mess of mascara and fear, a look of pure desperation. I can't let go of the company, she said, with a voice barely holding together. It's everything to me. If Monontoya Designs falls, I'm nothing. Absolutely nothing. She grabbed my hand, desperation in her eyes. And Nathan, she choked out. What about Nathan? He's at Yale. He's doing so well. The idea of our son being labeled either the child of a crook or a bankrupt nobody was unbearable. Do you want him to live with that shame? She asked, her voice cracking. He'll hate us. Hate me. Julian, we need another way. Her panic was overwhelming, and she wasn't wrong. She was trapped, facing a choice between disaster and disgrace, decline the deal and face financial collapse and potential charges, or accept it and risk everything on a money laundering racket. It was her empire on the brink, and she was caught in that precarious balance. I watched as she started to fall apart. This amazing woman whose brilliance and ambition knew no bounds. She was always on a mission, but often too focused to spot the danger until it was staring her in the face. I glanced at the paperwork lying on the desk, all part of the fake condo scheme. As an architect, I was no stranger to this universe, filled with a tangled web of deals, hidden costs, and fake companies to dodge any legal problems. I understood how to protect a project from letting the dirt stick. There was a risky way to do what needed doing while keeping her reputation, her integrity, and her public image intact. My mind worked out the plan. Julian, what are we going to do? She asked again, her voice edged with desperation. I took a deep breath, looking straight into the eyes of the woman I adored, the mother of our child. I came to a decision, the one path that could change everything. It would save her career, but it would cost me dearly. I helped her up, holding her shoulders as she cried. "Enough," I said with a steady voice, as if I'd already accepted what was to come. "Stop crying. Go to your room. Get some sleep." She stared back, confused, tears in her eyes. "But what about—" "This isn't your burden," I insisted. "Your name won't show up on these documents. You won't attend those meetings or be on any email chains. Stick to what you excel at, designing. Keep the company's face while you do." A glint of hope flickered in her eyes, even as she worried about the deal, the finances, the contracts. I turned away, grabbed the thick leather folder on the desk, and looked at the signature line meant for her, the head of Montoya Designs. "Let me manage it," I assured her. While Isabella charmed at gatherings and pored over fabric choices, I slipped into the shadows, behind the scenes. I became the middleman, jetting from Zurich to Dubai and the Cayman Islands. In sterile hotel rooms, I negotiated with men who seemed to have no last names. Back in New York, I leveraged my credentials and reputation to build a chain of shell companies: Thorn Construction, Thorn Project Management, Thorn Architectural Supply, a shield to keep Isabella safe from any backlash. When the $100 million lifeline came through, Montoya Designs was saved, the debts were cleared, lawsuits vanished, and Isabella became celebrated as a genius who navigated the storm. But the next step was money laundering. I was the one signing bloated construction deals, authorizing bank transfers to shady accounts, creating fictitious documents for supposed deliveries of expensive materials when only a bank slip existed. I got disturbingly good at it. My gift for designing real structures translated just as well into crafting fake facades. For 2 years, I lived a dual life, an acclaimed architect by day, a money washer by night. The business flourished. Her reputation remained unsullied. She stayed miles from any prison cell. However, hiding that kind of dirty money couldn't escape attention forever. The FBI didn't pound on Isabella's door. They didn't even know she existed in this mess. They came for me, trailing the Dubai operation for years. The financial breadcrumbs led them to my dummy companies, the inflated contracts, the fabricated invoices. In the end, it was my name, my signature, my seal on those fictitious papers that brought them to my office. Their entrance wasn't dramatic or loud. It was all under the radar. 2 men in dark suits just appeared in my office one morning. They put everything on the table. They had my wire transfer records, photos of my JFK meetings. I was busted, with no escape. They had a proposition for me. "Give us the names of the people you're working for," the lead guy said. "Tell us about the organization. Who's really pulling the strings in Dubai?" There was a file on the table. Every bit of it had my name, but hers was nowhere on it. I'd done too good a job at protecting her. Now, I was backed into a corner. I could hand over Isabella's name, spill all the beans, how scared she was, how she begged me to act, how everything I did was about shielding her and our son from falling into financial ruin. Maybe they'd cut me some slack. Maybe they'd get it. Or I could shoulder all the blame. I couldn't help but think about Isabella, scared and broken down, collapsed on the floor of our office. Then there was Nathan, living it up at Yale with all his future dreams still intact, boosted by a fortune now clouded in crime. So, I chose the second path, the one that set my destiny in stone. "I have no clue what you folks are on about," I said. I'd overshot my budget, made a few lousy moves, got sloppy with the books. There was no criminal organization. It was just me, cutting corners, getting desperate. I ended up admitting to a bunch of other mistakes, but not the ones they were really interested in. I owned up to being careless at work, dodging taxes, fiddling with the business files. I played the foolish, money-hungry architect who couldn't keep it together. To keep Isabella's name out of any laundering mess, I had to confess to something else. So, That's exactly what I did. Jail time was swerved thanks to lawyers funded by Isabella's now stable company. But I lost practically everything else. My architecture license, gone for good. My reputation, tarnished beyond repair. Julian Thorne, once an architect, now a disgraced figure. I had become a pariah, and that's when Nathan, my boy, twisted the dagger. He was 22, back home from Yale, and saw an opportunity. He went to his mom fuming, not supportive. He outright accused me, saying, "He betrayed you," shouting at her. I got word of his act later. He painted a picture where I was the villain, not the hero, claiming I swindled her company right under her nose, called me a criminal, said I humiliated her, and him too. He packaged it all in a neat little story. In that version, Isabella was the wronged party. And it didn't stop there. Isabella saw her business was safe, her image intact, while mine was trashed, and opted for the easy way out. She bought into Nathan's tale, sided with him, filed for divorce, claimed to be the guileless wife cheated by her scheming husband. She let Nathan, our son, cling to that belief. Let the whole world buy into it too. Never once took up for me. She simply let me shoulder the blame. That was the cost of saving her. The voice was calm, but sliced through my 2 decades of memories like a razor-sharp blade. I blinked, and the dreary office in Connecticut faded away, and suddenly I was in a conference room with cold, polished mahogany. My heart pounded in my ears, the past feeling more vivid than the present. Mr. Harrison was staring at me, his expression unreadable, but the rest, everyone's eyes were glued to me. Kyle, the financial guy, was looking at me like he was crunching numbers. Sophia, the companion, was studying me curiously, the usual emptiness in her stare replaced by a spark of interest. And Nathan, my son, his eyes drilled into me, intense and almost frightening. His face was twisted with anger and mistrust. The veins in his neck were nearly bursting. "The key!" he hissed, voice low and chilling. "Where is it? What did she leave you?" To him, it felt like some last revenge plot orchestrated by his mother, with me in on the ruse. He imagined conspiracies in every corner. I looked from his livid face to Mr. Harrison's calm one, searching for answers, but came up blank. The last 2 decades were filled with woodwork and peace, far from whatever madness Nathan believed. A vault key for a bunch of watches? It was absurd, like a scene from someone else's life. I glanced back at Nathan. In his mind, that entire $160 million inheritance depended on me. "You conjured up this ghost, didn't you? Just to get a rise out of me?" I shook my head, not as a denial, but genuinely clueless about what Nathan was talking about. "I honestly don't know what you're referring to," I replied. It was pure truth. My "I don't know" just lingered there, plain as day. Nathan's gaze locked onto mine, his face shifting from sheer disbelief to a mocking anger. He was mentally wrestling with the unexpected twist tossed his way, a twist that seemed inconceivable. For a second, he reminded me of a bull that had just been jabbed, but his surprise was fleeting. He forced out a rough, gravelly laugh, clearly wanting to show he was still in control, as if the whole thing was just a minor irritation. "Doesn't matter," he snapped, waving his hand as if dismissing a mosquito. "A key? You think a key matters to me? You think I'm going to start digging for treasure with him?" His laughter grew louder, almost exaggerated. "I'll have a locksmith crack that safe open before lunch. It's nothing more than some nostalgic trick by a woman who's fading fast." He sunk back into his seat, though far from relaxed. He was like a coiled spring, ready to snap. His perfectly manicured finger trembled just a bit as he pointed it at Mr. Harrison. "Cut the nonsense," he snapped, each word sharp and on point. "Enough of the charades, the servants, the butterflies, the keys. Get to the meat of it, Harrison. The 60 million, the important stuff. Read the part where it all lands with me. Do it now. Mr. Harrison glanced at Nathan from above his glasses, showing neither fear nor annoyance. He let Nathan's arrogant outburst float in the room, its impact lost in the heavy silence. Calm as ever, Mr. Harrison adjusted his spectacles, took a deliberate sip from his crystal glass, and turned the page. The sound of the page sounded like a thunderclap, slicing through the tension. It was like watching a judge flip to the final page of a verdict, relishing every moment. He was sticking to Isabella's script to the letter. "All right then," Mr. Harrison finally said, his tone sliding back to a calm, neutral stance. "Let's look at Article 8, talking about the main estate, all remaining property, and belongings, wherever they might be." This was the part where things got real. The air felt heavy, almost like it was closing in on us. Nathan was practically teetering on his chair, every muscle tight with greed. Even Kyle and Sophia, despite everything, were laser-focused, hoping this moment justified their discomfort. Harrison started reading. It was covering the liquid assets, stocks, bonds, properties, and leading interest in Montoya Designs LLC. He paused, eyes locked on the page, as if rereading a complicated paragraph. He was savoring the drama, a pro at stalling. "Come on, get on with it," Nathan mumbled under his breath, nearly inaudible. Finally, Harrison cleared his throat. "I decree the following," he announced. "First, to my ex-husband, Julian Thorne." I jerked my head up, taken completely by surprise. What was happening? Nathan made this sound, half gasp, half choke. It was like he'd been punched in the stomach, his sharp intake of breath echoing in the room. His face, once full of tense anticipation, turned stone cold. His eyes narrowed, filled with raw hatred, fixated on me. He wasn't even breathing. He was like a ticking bomb, about to explode. I saw the clench of his jaw, muscles tight, biting down on those probably expensive teeth. What game was Isabella playing? Was she giving me a pittance just to twist the knife before handing the rest to him? Harrison's voice remained steady, unfazed by the storm he was brewing. "To my ex-husband, Julian Thorne, I bestow the sum of $15. $15. Those words seemed to hang in the air. It wasn't just a slight. It felt like a public humiliation, a petty, almost childish jab. But Harrison wasn't done. He continued with the final twist, the one that dug the knife deeper and kept it turning. $15, in U.S. cash, meant to cover a bus ticket back to wherever he came from. A journey Nathan would surely be inclined to suggest. It all kicked off with this kind of snort, like someone who couldn't believe what they'd just heard. Before you knew it, Nathan's cool facade was gone. He exploded into this loud, booming laugh that came right from his gut. It wasn't a laugh because something was funny, but because he felt like he'd won some wicked prize. The room seemed to echo with his laughter. Nathan leapt out of his seat, doubled over with such intense laughter that tears streamed from his eyes, which were trained on me, his face absolutely crimson. $15, he hollered, his voice echoing around. 15 measly dollars. He bent over, smacking his hand on the plush mahogany table. Man, oh man, 15s, he kept repeating, gasping between his fits. Kyle sat there, looking caught off guard and a bit embarrassed, but he saw an opening to win Nathan over again. A sly grin crept onto his face. Unbelievable, Nathan. Just unbelievable. Sophia picked up on the vibe and let out a high, groveling laugh. A bus ticket for $15? Oh, Nathan, isn't she just a riot? Nathan stood up tall, still wiping at his face, clearly loving the attention. With his audience firmly back on his team, he puffed up like a proud peacock. She always did have a sharp wit, didn't she? He bragged. In Nathan's mind, he'd scored the ultimate victory. The teasing his buddies got was just the warm-up act, and the little screw-up with the key? Didn't matter. This very moment was the punchline he'd wanted all along. Now he was the one legally and financially on top, and I was reduced to a $15 punchline. His laughter finally petered out, transforming into a smug little chuckle. He fiddled with the cuffs of his designer jacket, grinning like a cat who's just had the cream. Back on top, just the way he liked it. As he looked my way, all humor dried up, replaced by ice-cold satisfaction. His smile broadened, oozing fake sympathy. "Well," he said with an air of finality, "guess that's that." He walked around the table like a lion surveying his domain, stopping to pierce me with a disdainful stare that felt almost tangible. "It's finished, old man," he sneered. "You heard her. $15. With a flourish, he whipped out a sleek wallet from his suit. "Tell you what," he murmured with a sneer. "15's a bit of an insult, wouldn't you agree?" Then, with all the flair of a stage actor, he tossed a $20 bill onto the table in front of me. "Here, $20. Consider it a gift from me." He gave me a challenging look, hoping I'd either react or break down. But I didn't flinch. I just stayed put, my eyes shifting between the $20 bill and Nathan's gloating mug. I wasn't humiliated, mad, or even sad. Instead, I had this deep-seated sense of expectation, because Isabel and I were keeping tabs on Mr. Harrison. He was calm as ever, sitting at the head of the table with a grip on some paperwork, not bothering to step in. This wasn't the grand finale, just an intermission. My non-reaction soured Nathan's mood more than any outburst could have. His smirk faltered. "What is it, old-timer? You lose your tongue?" he sneered. "Whatever. It's done. It's all mine now. So get going. Crawl back to your hole, or wherever you came from. Don't forget your bus fare." With that parting shot, he dismissed me entirely, turning to make his way back to his seat. He clapped Kyle on the shoulder, full of triumph. "All right, let's kick this off. We've got a lot of celebrating to do." He went for his jacket, eager to jump into his shiny new life. Nathan was in the middle of slipping his jacket on, almost punching Kyle's back in excitement. "Time to toast," he declared, all buzzed to splurge on champagne. "Harrison!" he called out, barely glancing. He shot a look at the lawyer, saying, "Just shoot those papers over to my office for signing. I'm out." And like that, he turned away, leaving like a king exiting his coronation. Then came the voice, cutting through the air like an icy blade. It wasn't loud, but it had a firmness that commanded attention. It was enough to freeze everyone in their tracks, especially Nathan. He was halfway out the door, his arrogant grin quickly shifting to something less cheery. "What?" he barked. Mr. Harrison hadn't budged 1 inch from his seat. His gaze at Nathan was like ice. The mask of neutrality was off now. "Take a seat." Nathan's smile disappeared so quickly, you'd think it was never there. His face went white, leaving behind blotchy red patches from laughing so hard moments before, making him look almost burned. "What did you just say?" he murmured, way less confident now. "I said," Mr. Harrison repeated, cool as a cucumber. "Sit down. I'm not done yet." "Not done?" Nathan's voice wobbled. "What are you talking about? You read it. 15%. That's the punchline. We're finished." Mr. Harrison, with all the calm of someone about to drop a bombshell, leaned down and grabbed a folder from his briefcase. He ignored the big fancy will on the table and picked up a plain manila folder instead. The seal was flashy, though, a big red wax stamp like something from a movie. "That stuff you just heard," Mr. Harrison pointed at the leather book, "is old news. It's the last part of her original will." He tapped the new folder on the table. "This little guy," he said in a voice that made the room feel colder, "is a codicil. It's kind of like a will's backup plan, legally speaking." He locked eyes with Nathan, not even blinking. "It got signed, Witnessed, and all sealed up a whole week before your mom's stroke, he told him, making every word land like a hammer. And in it, he said, catching my eye for a split second. The big deal in here, Mr. Harrison stressed, nixes all the previous talk about the estate split. Nathan didn't just sit down, he kind of collapsed into his chair like he had no bones left. His earlier victory vibe just fizzled out, leaving him looking ghostly. Kyle and Sophia stayed rooted to the spot, staring at the sealed paper as if it might burst into flames. When Mr. Harrison sliced open the seal, the whole room held its breath. From the folder, he pulled a single piece of paper attached to some other papers. Popping on his glasses, Mr. Harrison's voice filled the room, loaded with drama. "This right here," he declared, "is a note from your mom, Nathan, with orders for me to spell it out for everyone. It sets up the new Article 8. He started reading, and it was like Isabella herself was speaking right through him. "To my son Nathan," Harrison read, pausing for effect. "I'm doing this because I'm done chickening out. For 20 years, I let you live with lies, my lies, ones that wronged your dad." "Huh?" Nathan croaked, disbelief stripping his voice of strength. Harrison pressed on. "You've been swallowing a whopper about your dad, him being a schemer who duped me and ran off with company cash. All lies. The reality is totally opposite." "No!" Nathan yelled, sounding pained. He practically pounced across the table, eyes wild with panic. "She was sick, not herself. This letter isn't her. This whole thing is rigged." He wagged a finger at me. "He did this. He brainwashed her. This is nothing but a scam." In a panic, Nathan turned to his lawyer, Kyle. "Kyle, this can't be legit. She wasn't thinking straight. We'll challenge this. We'll knock it all down." Clearly fed up with Nathan's dramatics, Mr. Harrison raised a hand for quiet, slowly pulling another paper from the sealed folder. "About your mom's state of mind," he said sharply, cutting through Nathan's rant. "There's a solid 40-page shrink report here, done by 3 independent brain and behavior docs just 72 hours before she signed this. She asked for it. Let me sum up what they found." Harrison paused, his look daring Nathan to challenge him. Nathan's gaze was ice cold as he stared at the lawyer. "As they unanimously put it, and this holds legal weight, your mom was, let me quote, totally with it. Sharp as a tack, clearer than 99% of folks her age." The report hit the table with an echoing slam. "She wasn't nuts, Mr. Thorne. She was just ready to clean house. Now, if it's okay, I'll keep going." Nathan just kind of fell back into his chair, mouth hanging open, making those little gulpy noises people do when they're totally at a loss. He was all out of ideas, didn't even have the air to breathe. Meanwhile, Harrison was reading Isabella's letter again, his voice carrying the weight of her confession to Nathan. "Here's the deal, Nathan. 20 years ago, Montoya Designs was pretty much on the edge. I messed up big time with some terrible decisions. I got in over my head, trusted the wrong people. I wasn't just looking at bankruptcy. I was staring down criminal charges for things like fraud and negligence. Everything, house, business, reputation, was about to vanish. I was prison-bound. As I shut my eyes, those memories dragged me right back to that little gloomy office, sitting on the floor, crying and pleading. The chill of that night felt all too real again. Our way out came through an offer from some shady investors. It was a lifeline for the company, but accepting would mean we'd be laundering their dodgy money. I was trapped. Saying no was a one-way ticket to jail for fraud, but saying yes was a promise of jail time for money laundering down the line. I was ready to let everything go up in flames. And that's when your dad stepped in. Nathan let out this shaky noise next to me, covering his ears like he didn't want to hear a word Harrison said. "Your father, the guy you've been calling a criminal for the past 20 years, made the choice to protect me, to save you. He took that deal, sacrificing his own reputation, career, and peace of mind. He was the one who set up the fake companies, went to those shady meetings, handled the money. He did the dirty work so my name, and the Montoya name, stayed clean. Harrison didn't stop. He shouldered all the risk. He built a safeguard around me and the company, and he faced the heat. When the FBI came knocking, they came for him as he intended. He confessed, Nathan. He admitted to crimes he didn't commit, things like fraud and negligence, just to cover up the fact that I was guilty of money laundering. He lost his license, his good name, and his entire career. He did this all to save me and the company you now claim as yours. And what did I do? Harrison's voice softened. How did I repay his sacrifice? I listened to you. I bought into your anger. You said he was the criminal, that he tarnished us. In my shame and cowardice, I agreed. I let that become our story. I divorced him. I left him. I let you, our son, treat him like dirt, because I feared what would happen if you ever learned the truth. I was scared you'd look at me with the same disgust you felt for him. I was cowardly, Nathan, and I let you turn into this. A greedy, arrogant, hollow person who sneers at the one who gave everything so you could have this life. The $160 million fortune you want to call yours only exists because of one man, your father, Julian Thorne. The silence afterward was thick, almost choking. Harrison's voice, echoing Isabella's last words, broke through it. He wasn't just any lawyer anymore. He was the voice of a confession that was changing 20 years of history right there. Nathan sat still, no longer shaking his head, no longer plugging his ears. He just stared, his gaze fixed on the smooth, empty tabletop, looking pale and lifeless, like he'd just found out something world-shattering and was the last to know. Harrison, steady and relentless, kept going. Your father isn't a criminal, and he's definitely not a failure. He's a hero, someone who sacrificed so much that people like you and me can't even begin to understand it. He burned down his own life so we could be okay. And I let you treat him like trash. Honestly, I pretty much set you up to see him that way. I made your disdain for him a shield for myself to hide from the truth I couldn't face. Each time you ridiculed him or called him a washed-up old guy, it was like adding another brick to the wall I built around my own failure. Because what was that truth? Deep down, I was the one who messed up. I was the weak link, the failure. I was the one who let this whole family down. My hands were shaking, so I gripped them tightly on the table, my knuckles almost turning white from the effort. Tears filled my eyes, something I hadn't experienced in years. But this wasn't sadness. It was something else entirely. It was vindication, a sharp and long overdue sense of justice, like 20 years too late. Hearing Harrison talk was like watching him tear apart everything my son Nathan believed, word by crushing word. He laid it out bluntly. This massive $160 million empire Nathan was waiting to inherit, as if he were some spoiled prince, wasn't due to him. It wasn't even just because of me. It was all thanks to Julian Thorne. Then Isabella's voice cut through, clear and hard. She laid it all out. You've never done a proper day's work, never built anything yourself, never sacrificed. You've been a leech, living off what someone else created while passing judgment on the one man who made it all possible for you. Her words hit their mark. Nathan let out this low, hurt sound, kind of like a wounded animal. He whispered in denial to the table, No, she loved me, she'd know." All his anger and defiance vanished. He was left empty, as if someone had pulled the rug out from under his life. His vision of a perfect mother, a deadbeat dad, his future as the heir, all gone in no time. He didn't just sit down. Nathan collapsed into the chair. His ridiculously expensive suit, once armor for his arrogance, now hung on him, ridiculously oversized. He seemed like a scared kid, totally broken. He muttered again, more softly, "It's not true." She wouldn't. But Harrison, flipping through the paperwork, looked up with eyes as cold as ice. "She did, Mr. Thorne, and she had it notarized." Then he moved to the conclusion. The atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't just a conference room anymore. It felt like a courtroom, a confessional, a grave all in one. Nathan sat there, a hollow shell in his fancy suit, staring at the table, seeing nothing. He was looking at 2 decades of his life flipped completely on its head, laid bare under harsh fluorescent lights. Kyle and Sophia were there too, bystanders to something enormous they never knew was unfolding. Mr. Harrison's voice carried the gravity of Isabella's confession anew, formal and decisive. This was the final word, legally binding and unyielding. Holding that final document page, he turned his eyes on Nathan. "Your mother's letter," he explained, "is both the legal and moral introduction to this, the ultimate clause of her last will and testament. It overrides everything that came before. This is Article 8, the permanent resolution." He paused, letting his words lock in with everyone around the table. The silence was so thick, you could almost hear the clock ticking away. "As my final wish and testament," Harrison went on in a calm, steady voice, "all my properties, whether real or personal, wherever they may be, all my stocks, bonds, and liquid assets, my art collection, my various holdings, and most importantly, my entire unencumbered 100% controlling stake in Montoya Designs LLC and all its branches, an estate currently valued at about $160 million. He listed off each asset like a judge delivering a verdict. It was no gift. It felt like an immense burden being handed over. Nathan sat there, unmoving, barely breathing. He was more like a statue than a person, frozen in disbelief. A man with an ashen face sat, absorbing it all. Reading the will aloud, Harrison said, "I give, devise, and bequeath." Pausing, then casting his eyes down the shiny table, deliberately avoiding Nathan, Kyle, or Sophia. Instead, he looked directly at me. For that instant, it felt as though everything was about to change. I thought about my workshop, the scent of sawdust, the quiet I preferred over any riches or achievements. None of that was in my thoughts, only the question, what had she done? What was this bewildering twist? I was just starting to wrestle with the truth her confession had shed light on after 2 decades of deception. The idea of all that wealth and this empire, it was almost incomprehensible, like hearing it in another language. Mr. Harrison turned back to the will. "I give, devise, and bequeath to my ex-husband Julian Thorne." The words hung there, struggling to sink in. That was me, Julian Thorne, in a suit that had been stylish 20 years ago. I'd been brought here for a sort of public showdown. The silence broke softly with a strangled sound. It came from Nathan, but I just couldn't bring myself to face him. I was completely frozen, imagining the weight of all those New York City skyscrapers crushing down on me. $160 million, Montoya Designs. This wasn't some generous gift. It was a lifelong sentence. It was the chain yanking me back to the world I'd escaped, those shiny buildings, endless stacks of paperwork, and deceitful games every day. My heart pounded in my chest like a slow, thunderous drumbeat. Thankfully, Mr. Harrison didn't let the quiet drag on. He knew the next words were the real bombshell. The cash? That was just surface stuff. The reasoning behind it was the heart of the matter. His voice cut through the stifling silence. "I leave this not as a gift, but as payment, as a long overdue yet insufficient compensation for the career I ruined, the respect I allowed to be taken, and the family I cowardly let fall apart," he read aloud. And that's when it struck me. It was never about the money. It was always about what it represented. This was her final, unalterable confession. Her apology, laid bare for everyone. From the beyond, she was fixing my reputation, restoring my dignity. She wasn't simply passing me a company. She was setting the record straight that it should have been mine all along. I was the one who saved the day. I looked down at my hands, rough and calloused, like a craftsman's hands should be. They sat there on the shiny, polished table. And suddenly, I was the head of an empire I never asked for. A soft whimper broke the silence. It was Nathan. Not a titan, not a ruler, just a man, or really, a 42-year-old boy, coming to grips with a lifetime built on a lie spun by his mom and funded by his dad. Kyle and Sophia were already starting to fade into the background, their faces blank with disbelief at this new twist. They'd bet big on a star that abruptly went into a nosedive. And now they were slipping into oblivion. I glanced at Mr. Harrison, who hadn't stopped looking at me, waiting. $160 million. The company, the penthouse fit for royalty, the watches that cost more than cars. Isabella, my brilliant, unpredictable, impossible wife. Even from the grave, she controlled the narrative. She cleared my name, gave me validation, but in doing so, she bound me to her story, for better or worse. She handed me everything, yet somehow, she took everything away too. My peaceful, simple life was gone. And Nathan, my son, sat there in complete shock. His mouth hung open, eyes vacant, as he tried to wrap his head around the fact that the $160 million world he thought he was getting just disappeared. And instead, it landed in my lap, the person he despised the most. He was grasping for air, like someone drowning, desperately trying to breathe. Kyle and Sophia were utterly lost. Their golden ticket didn't just vanish, it blew up in their faces. Kyle's eyes darted around frantically, trying to come up with a new scam, but drawing a blank. Sophia's face was ghost white, her makeup layered on so thick it looked like it might chip right off, like a cracking porcelain doll. Harrison, the man overseeing this will's execution, still had the final words to say. "We've got to wrap up one last thing," he eventually said, his voice firm and decisive, like a judge delivering a verdict. He turned his attention to my son. "Now, for my son, Nathan Thorne." At the mention of his name, something flickered in Nathan's otherwise dull eyes. It wasn't hope, it was a desperate need to grab onto anything, rather than facing complete emptiness. Slowly, with visible effort, he forced his head to rise, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow, meeting Harrison's gaze. Nathan was hanging by a thread, but to what? Was he hoping for some big inheritance, a trust, some kind of allowance, anything he assumed was rightfully his? Harrison's eyes met his, cold and void of empathy. This was just another duty for him, nothing more. "For my son Nathan," he read from the document, "who has lived lavishly, never really valuing what was sacrificed for him. I leave him one thing." Harrison paused, looked at the papers, and then back into Nathan's eyes. "I'm giving him what he once flippantly suggested for his father," Mr. Harrison declared, and suddenly I couldn't breathe properly, silently begging for it not to be true. Nathan glanced between me and Harrison, his face a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. He was too overwhelmed to make sense of it all. I don't understand," he managed to say, confused. But Mr. Harrison didn't clarify with words. Instead, he deliberately reached into the drawer of his desk, pulling out a piece of paper, a cashier's check certified by the bank. He represented the estate, delivering the instructions as per my mother's dying wishes. Showing the check for a brief moment, he then slid it across the shiny mahogany table till it stopped in front of Nathan. $15, Harrison announced in a flat, unequivocal voice. This is what your mother left you, Mr. Thorne, for your bus fare. Kyle, notorious in the finance world for his sharpness, simply stood up with no words. He pushed in his chair, collected his briefcase, and quietly exited the room without even a glance at us. Sophia, on the other hand, didn't hold back. She glared at the check and then Nathan's crushed face. Her initial shock transformed into outright disdain, like a lioness disappointed with her pride. The man she thought was her golden ticket, the one who kept her in luxury, was now just a $15 man. "You're pathetic," she spat out, venom dripping from her words. Grabbing her high-end purse, she marched out of the room without a backward glance, her heels echoing sharply as she departed. And that left us, the three of us, the forlorn check sitting on the polished wood, a brutal blow to my son's ego. Nathan just stared at it, breathing in short, shallow gasps, till even that stopped. He became a statue, a man devastated, his cheek twitching, barely a sign of life. Then, the storm broke loose. Starting as a silent scream, it grew into an overpowering howl of rage, bursting outward, almost tangible. It was a cry not just of loss, but of jarring self-realization. "No!" he roared, flailing his arms and sending everything, the glasses, notepads, and a hefty water carafe, crashing to the ground. "I'll sue you!" he yelled, voice shaky and splattering spit everywhere, his fury aimed at no one in particular, at his deceased mother. "I'll sue all of you. She was insane. I'll prove it. I'll tear it all down." His actions became frenzied, eyes wide, veins popping. Then his focus landed. All of Nathan's anger, shame, and pain pinpointed into a sharp dislike for one person. "You!" he bellowed. "You did this! Turned her against me! Thief!" And with an explosive surge, he bolted across the room. No calm businessman here, just a maddened creature launching himself at me. I barely had time to react, just trying to brace myself. But Harrison? He moved like lightning. Calm moments ago, his finger quickly jabbed the intercom's button. Nathan hadn't even made it around the table when the room's doors flew open. Two bulky security guards rushed in, not your average rental guys. These were top-level, suited pros with earpieces, straight out of a spy film. But Nathan didn't realize until they were on him. One grabbed his left arm, the other his right, expertly spinning him around, ripping his fancy suit and pinning his arms. "Let me go," he screamed, a mix of rage and desperation in his voice. He struggled pointlessly, like a bug caught in a web. Harrison stood, taking in the scene. A trashed room, Nathan a sobbing, flailing wreck, held tight by security. No need for Harrison to raise his voice. "Get him out of here," he commanded, his tone icy and unwavering. "You can't do this," Nathan cried desperately as the guards started to escort him out. "I'm Nathan Thorne. This is my building. You're all fired." But Harrison interrupted, his voice cutting through Nathan's outburst like a blade. "Remember your inheritance," he said, nodding toward the unclaimed check on the table. And just like that, something snapped within Nathan. He began yelling obscenities at everyone. Harrison, his own mother, but mostly at me. "I'll kill you, old man. Do you hear me? I'll kill you." As they dragged him toward the elevators, his shoes squeaked fruitlessly against the marble floor. Then came a final loud thud, followed by silence. The echoes of Nathan's rage vanished, leaving only a profound stillness. I could hear my own breath and the faint sound of a siren far off in the distance. The adrenaline drained away, leaving me completely spent. 2 decades of exhaustion settled upon me in that instant, turning my chair into a refuge and my suit into a heavy burden. It was just me now, the man who owned everything, and Harrison, the bearer of grim news. I surveyed the wreckage around me, overturned chairs, shattered glass, Nathan's discarded money taunting me alongside the $15 check. Harrison, as calm as ever, began organizing the documents, his face giving nothing away, as if a storm hadn't just torn through his office. But there was still one question lingering, one final piece of the puzzle. The key, I ventured. The watches. Why involve me in this chaos? It was cruel. Harrison paused his tidying. For the first time that day, his lips softened into a genuine, albeit wistful smile. Mr. Thorne, he started softly. That was her son's final test. A test? A test that he failed completely. She wanted him to swallow his ego, maybe ask you for support, to see if there was anything left in him worth saving, he explained, shaking his head. And there was a message for you. From his jacket pocket, the one he reached into earlier for his glasses, he brought out something small. Before me lay two options, a thick leather binder and a sealed envelope. What drew my attention was an old-fashioned brass key beside them, a typical house key. He nudged it toward me, and it slid across the table with a soft clink, stopping just near my hand. This, he said, nodding to the key, is what she left for you. Forget the watches. They were just a distraction, part of the setup. I couldn't take my eyes off the simple object. So what does this key open? I asked, bewilderment coloring my voice. It opens the penthouse, sure, Harrison replied. But remember the safe she mentioned? It's empty, no watches, just velvet boxes stripped of their contents. Another one of her infamous jokes, apparently. Curiosity tugged at me. Then what's really inside it? I asked quietly. Harrison leaned in, lowering his voice. There's another safe, Mr. Thorne. A hidden wall safe behind a painting in her private study. He let the statement linger in the air briefly. This key opens that safe. Inside you'll find original evidence. Everything that's been concealed. The complete unredacted 2005 file, original wire transfers, the shell company documents you signed, and critically, all the emails and letters where she asked for your help. My heart seemed to pause. She kept all of it, Harrison continued gently. For 2 decades, she safeguarded the untouched truth. Her confession is supported entirely by what's in there. She chose you to uncover it. She wanted you to decide if it should be exposed or kept under wraps. The fortune? That was her apology. But this, he indicated the key, this was her way of repairing your name. I reached out, my worn fingers closing around the simple, cool brass piece. The $160 million, that felt more like a shackle, a burden, a golden trap. Yet this key, this was freedom. Through the whole ordeal, I realized something profound. Truth, it turns out, carries its own weight and waits for the right time to surface. For 20 years, a lie had shadowed a family, driving a wedge between a son and a father who had unknowingly been his guardian. But deception sown in silence cannot stay hidden forever. Isabella's final confession showed that no matter how deeply hidden, the truth has a way of surfacing. It serves as a reminder that genuine integrity isn't about looking good for others, but about the quiet and unrecognized sacrifices we choose to make. At the end of the day, having the truth clear one's name is far more valuable than any amount of money. So, if you had been in that situation with a key and the huge responsibility of $160 million, what path would you have chosen?